What's up, everybody? My name is Stuart Jackson. I'm the co-founder of BlackAmericanHistory.org and your host, and I'd like to welcome you all to The Rewind. So you may be asking yourself, what is The Rewind? Well, it's not quite a webinar, not necessarily a TV show, but a unique online experience that's fun, thought-provoking, and engaging all at the same time. You'll see what I mean about that momentarily. Today, we're going to celebrate and honor Black history, but more specifically, Juneteenth. So what do we have in store for you today? Well, we have a couple of game show questions to test your knowledge. We have a moment of clarity segment to go over big history and the 4 major ages of Black history, because we're BlackAmericanHistory.org. So we got to give you that knowledge. And lastly, we have a lively discussion with a special guest to go over Juneteenth. But more so, what is Juneteenth? What does it mean to you? And where does it go from here? Also, we're going to be announcing the winner of our monthly newsletter contest at the end of the show. What's the prize? 2 tickets to Bad Boys Ride or Die in theaters now. If you missed out on the newsletter, you can sign up at BlackAmericanHistory.org/newsletter and join thousands of others getting smarter about Blackness every month. Now, with all that being said, sit back and embrace The Rewind.
Hello there, I'm Adrian Silas, and welcome to the Heritage Game Show, a trivia show that tests your knowledge of Black heritage. So, this game is really simple. Shortly, I'll ask you a question, followed by some possible answers. Only one answer is correct. You'll have 3 seconds to pick the correct answer before it's revealed. Now, are you ready to play? Okay, let's go. Here is the question. Which country has the largest Black population outside of the African continent? Is it Brazil, the United States, or the Dominican Republic? This is a tricky one. What do you think? We will reveal the answer in 3, 2, 1. That's right. The correct answer is Brazil. It has the largest Black population outside of Africa, with a whopping 108 million Black people. Wow! And that's more than double the United States Black population, which comes in second at roughly 47 million. Well, thanks for playing. I hope you've learned something new today. I'm Adrian Silas, and I'll see you next time.
Just a quick moment of clarity. Thank you for your time.
Welcome to Moment of Clarity. My name is Chris, founder of BlackAmericanHistory.org. And before we jump into our Juneteenth discussion, I want to introduce to you what I call the 4 major ages of Black history. And the reason is to give context to the value of Juneteenth by explaining where we are today in Black history and where Juneteenth fits within that history. So let's jump right in. Okay, so there are 4 major ages of Black history. And the latest, which is the current age that we are in, is the Atlantic Age. And the Atlantic Age, we have been in for about 530 years. This is the history we're taught in school with Christopher Columbus, with slavery and Harriet Tubman and the Civil War and civil rights movements, that era. And it started in 1492 when the Moors, who were Black North Africans, were expelled from Spain after ruling there for almost 800 years. And they brought order and civilization and cultural and technological advancement and sciences to Spain until a few of the powerful Spanish families joined forces. They fought back and they expelled these Black North Africans. And they were subsequently enslaved, and they brought them, along with many other Africans, up and down the West Coast to the Caribbean islands and to Central and South America to work, to bring wealth to Europe. And this was a major event that kicked off the Atlantic slave trade, and it marks the beginning of the Atlantic Age, the period of European slavery and colonialism of African people. And it's important to realize that this period didn't create us or make us who we are. It altered who we already were. We were people before this period. We had families, we had culture, we had our own language, our own belief systems, our own advanced technologies, creations. We were skilled, we were warriors, etc. So when you hear, the Florida governor saying slavery was good because it helped us learn skills, well, you can only believe that if you start our history in the Atlantic Age, where we're stripped of our humanity. But we're still in this age today, where slavery and colonialism of African people still exist. Is how we get a lot of the resources that we use, the computer we're using, cars, phones, planes, TVs. Those materials come from this system of slavery and colonialism in Africa and throughout the diaspora, rather than fair and equal trade. But the question is, what was happening with Black people before 1492? Well, that was the Saharan age. Excuse me, the Saharan age. And this is a current age of almost 1,400 years. This is the Arab slavery and colonialism of African people, mostly taken from sub-Saharan Africa and transported across the Sahara to the north to be sold to people in the Mediterranean and the Middle East, known as the trans-Saharan slave trade. So long before Europe even got involved in the African slave trade, the Arabs had been enslaving Africans for 800 years prior. We're not taught this in school, but this slave trade kicked off after the Islamic religious crusade of Aksum, which was one of the late great ancient African civilizations that fell in 631. Arab slavery and colonialism also still exists today in Africa, but we weren't always enslaved by others. And that brings us to the age before the Saharan age, and that's the dynastic Kemetic age. And this is the golden era of African people. 3,800 years of global power and dominance with the world's wealthiest and most advanced empires and civilizations. Now notice, I did not say colonialism. Our power and dominance was different than Europe's. It was different from Europe. We didn't seek to conquer and control the whole world because we really didn't need to. Africa is the most resource-rich continent on the planet. There's nothing that we needed that we didn't have at home. In fact, other nations came to Africa because of our wealth and because of our resources and technology and knowledge and culture. We're typically not taught this piece of our history in school, but this is where you hear about the African pharaohs like the Nefertiti and Nefertari and King Tut and the pyramids in ancient Egypt. It's within this age that there are 4 golden ages, 30 dynasties, over 300 pharaohs, and it begins when King Narmer unifies Upper and Lower Kemet, or Egypt as we call it today, and creates the first successive dynasties. Now, these were not the first civilizations. There were many before, to be clear. But this was a period of technological advancement and civilization that was unmatched anywhere else in the world. And it lasted twice as long as the Saharan and the Atlantic age combined. And before that, was the pre-dynastic African age, which takes us all the way back to the discovery of agriculture, which happened all over the world, kind of roughly around the same time. There was agriculture in Africa, as well as Asia, as well as the Americas, North and South America, where we begin to settle. We stop being nomads. We begin to settle and build our own cultures and communities and settlements wherever we were. And those are the four major ages that we're typically only taught about the Atlantic age. So it makes sense that Juneteenth as a holiday would fall within the Atlantic age, which actually is a very recent history of Black people. And there's a saying that if Black history was represented in a book of 1,000 pages, slavery would begin on page 999. And the Atlantic age that we are usually taught is page 999. But let's dive into page 199, because after all, we are in it today. So let's talk about the Atlantic age. So the Atlantic age, 530 plus years, can be broken down into 5 periods. First, we have what I call the New World Shock period from 1492 to 1619. It's about a 130-year period. The Moors, they get expelled from rule in Spain, and these newly European enslaved Africans get taken to the Caribbean islands and Central and South America to produce wealth for the European powers. And this is a period of complete shock by the African people. They arrive in a new land they don't know, people they had never seen before, using languages that they are unfamiliar with. They're given names that they don't relate to under a brutal system of slavery they had never experienced before, and with no pay. It was complete shock and trauma for 130 years. And we rebel, we run away. There's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of conflict. And then following this, from 1619 to 1791 is the fight for humanity period, about 170 years. Enslaved Africans, they arrive in what would become the U.S. They're told that they are not humans, so that they could be exploited for eternal slavery. And we're stripped of our humanity, told that we're not humans. And before we can fight for freedom, we first have to fight to prove that we are humans deserving of freedom, just like other humans. But we're told that our culture doesn't matter, our families don't matter, our history doesn't matter, our traditions and religious beliefs don't matter, and we are totally dehumanized. So now we're really picking up the fight. The rebellions are more frequent because we're fighting to prove that we are in fact human and worthy of freedom. So then 1791 to 1910 is the fight for freedom period. And that's starting with the Haitian Revolution, where enslaved Blacks rise up against the French and fight for 13 years straight and defeats them and becomes their own independent Black nation. And it is a major win in the fight for freedom. And it sends shock waves around the world, and it leads to a period of major Black revolts with great Black leaders. This is the period where we get Frederick Douglass and Sojourner Truth and Nat Turner and Harriet Tubman and Shaka Zulu, John Horse and the Seminole Wars, the German Coast Uprising, the Great Jamaican Revolt, Buster's Rebellion in Barbados, the Civil War, Emancipation. This is where Juneteenth happens, right? This is what we're celebrating. All of this happens during that 120-year period because we've done a good job at proving our humanity. So now we're in this big fight for freedom. And the Civil War happens in the 1860s, where we become free on paper in 1865, and we're trying to find our way in American society. So we start moving. So this is when we're honoring, this is the period where we're honoring Juneteenth, when we celebrate. And that leads us to the next period, the fight for equality period. And this is from the early 1900s to about 1968, because we're free, but we're not equal. And then roughly around 1910, we start the migration, the Great Migration out of the South. And we start leaving the South in search of, better opportunities, better equality. And we start moving north, we start moving out west, and we have a cultural revolution where we start to reclaim our sense of self. That's what you see when you hear about the Harlem Renaissance. But then the Birth of a Nation film, after all of these people, all these Black people are moving into new territories, Birth of a Nation film comes out 1915, It tries to dehumanize Black men, but we fight back. A lot of our justice organizations get formed during this period. So we get many strong Black leaders, and we're all in it together at this point. The families are strong. The community is strong. The culture is strong. Marcus Garvey hits the scene with the UNIA, which is the world's largest Black organization at the time. We get the NAACP, the Harlem Renaissance, Black Wall Street, Black labor unions, Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam, the Black Panther Party, SNCC, CORE, SCLC, Civil Rights Movement, 5% Nation, Republic of New Africa. All of these people, Muhammad Ali, that's another good one. All of these people, all of these justice movements and leaders, they are really bringing the heat to the U.S., constantly clashing. And the race riots are at all-time high. If you're watching this today, June 2024, it's likely that your parents, your grandparents, and great-grandparents possibly were born roughly during this period, during this fight for equality period. And the U.S. has to neutralize this because it can't go on for too long. So COINTELPRO, which is an FBI program, gets created to monitor and infiltrate these Black organizations because they are really disturbing the peace. But they're created toward the end of this period. We get the Watts riots that happened in 65, and things change in the late 60s and early 70s when one of our last great visionaries and leaders of a mass comprehensive Black movement for change, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., gets assassinated April 4th, 1968, and everything changes because our movements become neutralized and they start to fall apart. And that brings us to the current period, what I call the disorientation period, which is from 1968 to the present. And we've been in this period for about 50 years. Dr. Martin Luther King and many of our great leaders, they get assassinated around the same time. Malcolm X in 65, Martin Luther King in 68, Fred Hampton in 69, George Jackson in 71. So now the leadership is gone, the vision is gone, the protection is gone. Black gangs start forming and growing. The Black Guerrilla Family in 66, the Gangster Disciples in 68, the Four Corner Hustlers in the late 60s, the Crips in the 69, Bloods in 72, People Nation in the late 70s. So now there's a lot of infighting. Our major Black movements, they get stalled, they get manipulated, they fall apart through the 70s after many of our leaders are killed. And a lot of the progress we made gets reversed. The Highway Act of 1956 starts to take shape around the mid-60s and breaks up the Black communities as highways run through them. The trade programs in the 70s that allowed us to learn how to make money with our hands gets removed from the schools, which destabilizes our ability to make money independently, which stalls the growth of the Black business community. Then we get the crack epidemic of the 80s that neutralizes us psychologically, along with the rise of gangster rap, because these gangs have been forming for the past decade. That's followed by mass incarceration in the 90s that pulls the men from the family. Rodney King beating happens in 91, followed by the LA riots in 92. Gentrification is heavy. President Bush has his faith-based initiative in 2001 that funds the Black churches and alters their programs. So the churches are less vocal about social issues because, they once were the hub and the protection of the justice movements. The death of Trayvon Martin and then a slew of police killings, they get picked up by mass media outlets. We get the controversial Black Lives Matter movement and George Floyd protests. And, now we're here, right? No clear leadership, no clear vision, no clear future, no commitment or accountability to the community for our actions. We're just kind of doing what we want. We're broken up. We're not unified. But you can see many of us starting to get our sense of self back with our hair and our adoption of Afrobeats music and cultural awareness speakers and such. But the question is, what's next? But let's talk about Juneteenth right here in the fight for freedom period. So when we come back, we'll bring a guest to the stage to discuss Juneteenth in a way that we may have never thought about before. So I'll see you after the break.
Welcome back to The Rewind. It's amazing how much information is not shared when it comes to Black history. For instance, did any of you know about the 4 major ages of Black history prior to this event? If you did, kudos to you. And if you didn't, you're not alone. But you can close that knowledge gap by subscribing to our newsletter at blackAmericanHistory.org/newsletter. Now, how many of you answered the first game show question correctly? If you didn't, you'll have a second chance at another question coming up shortly, so be ready. After that, we're going to jump into our Juneteenth discussion with our special guest. Now, during this discussion, we encourage you to leave comments with our speakers, and they'll try to engage with as many as they can. Switching gears, I'm taking a trip to Africa in the near future, but I keep getting pushback from friends saying things like, dude, you're going to be in a hut, or there's no AC out there. And lastly, what are you going to eat? And I wish there was a way to address that. Well, anyways, let's jump into this next segment.
Do you have air conditioners in Africa? No, we don't have air conditioners in Africa, but whenever the weather gets really hot and we begin to sweat profusely, the community chief priest gathers all the elephants in the community at the village square and then gives them a treat and gets them to flap their ears. Once they begin to flap their ears, a cool breeze is circulated throughout the community. The faster they flap their ears, the cooler the breeze. And that's how we survive without air conditioners in Africa. Yeah.
Name a city in Africa.
They're hungry. Do you think they're thinking about what cities in Africa?
So when I have a child, I want to take them to Africa. You know what I'm saying? I want to take them to the motherland and let them see that, hey, we're blessed over here, but look at them. They're staying in woods and trees. Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm Christian Sargent, owner of Vicky Cakes Pancake and Waffle Mix based in Dallas, Texas. Vicky Cakes is based off of my mother Vicky's 40-year pancake mix recipe. It's amazing, dairy-free, vegan-friendly, free of artificial flavors, preservatives, colors, or any additives. And guess what? We're bringing families back to the table all across America with what we love to call the hearter breakfast. Both women and mothers love Vicky Cakes. There's something for everyone. Blueberry pancake mix, pecan pancake mix, chocolate chip, and the OG, the original buttermilk flavor. If your child has a dairy allergen, or maybe you have a dairy allergen, don't worry, Vicky Cakes is for you too. The problem with most pancake mixes on the market today is that while they are easy and add water only, they're not the best solution and alternative for a better breakfast option. We're talking additives, preservatives, artificial flavors and colors like powdered milk and dried eggs. Oh my, nobody wants that. Vicky Cakes is making sure that your family has the real deal. Real blueberries, real pecans, real milk chocolate chips, a real good recipe from a real woman with a real family for the ones you really love. Vicky Cakes is the real deal. So help us to reach more families by getting on these shelves, getting into the mouths of more people, and bringing more people back to the table with the hearter breakfast.
My name is Chantel Powell, and I am a mother, a wife, a working mom, and I'm also a budding entrepreneur.
Play Pits promo take 101.
I decided to start experimenting with deodorant because my oldest son came home from basketball and smelled horrible after basketball and football practice. And at that time, I knew that something had to be done, but I wasn't quite comfortable putting him into your average store-bought deodorant. So I went in the kitchen and kind of did some research on ingredients and whipped up my first batch. Cam went to camp and told the whole camp and said, "Mom, you have to make deodorant for everyone." And I was very blown away, but also like, boy, get out of here. I'm not making deodorant for everyone. But then I thought about it and I was like, Cam, you might be onto something.
Hello there, it's Adrian Silas, and welcome back to the Heritage Game Show, a trivia show that tests your knowledge of Black heritage. This game is really simple. In a moment, I'll ask you a question, followed by some possible answers. Only one answer is correct. You'll have 3 seconds to pick the correct answer before it's revealed. So, are you ready to play? Okay, let's go. Here is the question. What country is the red arrow pointing to? These are the Caribbean islands. Is it the Dominican Republic? Is it Jamaica? Or is it Haiti? This one's good. The correct answer will be revealed in 3, 2, 1. Yes, the correct answer is Haiti. It shares an island with the Dominican Republic to the east of it. Haiti is the world's only independent black nation created by enslaved blacks rising up and rebelling against European powers in what is known as the Haitian Revolution, a very important event in black history. Thanks for playing. I hope you've learned something new today. I'm Adrian Silas, and I'll see you next time.
Just a quick moment of clarity. Thank you for your time.
Last segment of the show. Welcome to the last segment of the show. I hope everybody is enjoying what we have going on here. Now, for this last segment of the show, I'm going to bring about a guest to talk about Juneteenth in depth, not just about what it is, but about what does it and should it mean to us. So for this, I'd like to introduce our special guest, who is an assistant professor in the Department of History at North Carolina Central University. He specializes in African-American intellectual history, digital humanities, 19th century American history, psychohistory, and the history of Southern education. That's a mouthful. Previously served as CLIR Fellow for African American Studies Data Curation at UNCG, and his current research centers on exploring the relationship between double consciousness and psychohistory. Please help me welcome Dr. Brian A. Robinson. Welcome, Brian. Thank you for showing up. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris, for having me. It's a pleasure. This is beautiful.
Thank you. So for starters, just for all of us common folk, there was a whole lot of tongue twisting words: psychohistory, intellectual history, the history of Southern education. Like, can you break that down? There's double consciousness. Like, break that down in simplistic terms. What that means.
So part of the academy is always using a whole lot of words to explain a whole lot of nothing. That's kind of what we do, right? It shows that we're important. But in short, to a good extent, intellectual history is the study of thinkers and ideas. So the study of thinkers and ideas, the more purest form of intellectual history in terms of studying a thinker is biography. So you think of any type of biography that can count as intellectual history. The the latter part, in terms of the studying ideas, you may read a book titled The History of Capitalism, right? That would kind of serve as the study of an idea, because capitalism begins as an idea. It begins as a theory. And so you get a sense of intellectual history being kind of this big umbrella that studies thinkers and ideas, and oftentimes, cross-pollinating, both studying the thinker and the ideas at the same time. For me, I focus on the latter, right? Really kind of focusing on the idea, because I want to get at the topic of meaning. And this kind of, you can see how this kind of intersects with the conversation of psychohistory, because psychohistory, in short, is a study of emotions, trying to get a better understanding of one's behavior and motivations. So me, as I'm studying meaning and how people have developed cultures around things like meaning, I want to know more. So to kind of think deeper in that, I had to kind of add on the tag psychohistory to show that the way we develop meaning isn't just always rational. There's a lot of things at work, and psychology as a field helps us to understand it. So psychohistory, to us, be short, kind of brings in different types of fields of knowledge, like psychology, sociology, philosophy, to help us to kind of grasp the different ways of thinking about a topic or an idea.
Gotcha. Okay, so this goes very well with this segment, because I honestly don't really know how to feel about Juneteenth. So I'm glad you broke that down, because maybe you can kind of help me work through it. So, all right. So if we're talking about, let me kind of get to the first question, right? We're talking about this fight for freedom period. Okay. And in this fight for freedom period, this is where we have Juneteenth. So we have June 19th, commemorating the ending of slavery in the U.S. when Major General Gordon Granger ordered the final enforcement of the Emancipation Proclamation in Texas,
right,
in 1865. Although some people still remain enslaved even after this.
Yeah, so the end of slavery isn't that day. It isn't Juneteenth, right? We talk about the end of slavery. We really, when you add in the 13th Amendment, right? That's it. That's final, because the Emancipation Proclamation is only focused on southern states, the states that are in rebellion. But the border states can still have slaves, and in some cases that is the case. And so when you start thinking about all these different dates in terms of when people actually receive news about emancipation, is going to start a whole frenzy about when emancipation is somewhat celebrated. And in places like Galveston, Texas, or in places like Oklahoma, Juneteenth is more local to them. For places like North Carolina, or what we call the Old South, it would be things like January 1st.
Okay. So then, so are we celebrating it correctly? Like to say that we're celebrating the end of slavery, I guess how accurate is that then, if that's the case?
I guess the question is, are we celebrating the end of slavery with Juneteenth? And that's more of a question of today. So this is why I study questions of meaning, because these things change over time. We have to arrange facts in our past to try to answer questions of our present. And so Juneteenth may have had some type of significance that focuses on the end of slavery, particularly for those in Eastern Texas and Oklahoma, that marked significance to their local community and culture. But that doesn't always translate to other parts of the United States, where, again, January 1st or places or times like September 22nd may be a date for certain locations. And so we have to be kind of careful that when we mark a day like Juneteenth as the end of slavery, to kind of read into the history a little bit more and begin to think, when we say Juneteenth, and begin to kind of celebrate it the way we are now recently, what is it that we're trying to do, and what is it that we're trying to say?
I see. Okay, so I guess one of the things that that I have trouble with is figuring out, like, what am I trying to do? What am I trying to say about Juneteenth, right? And in how I celebrate it, because I myself don't really I don't really know how to celebrate Juneteenth. I don't know if it's because nobody showed me, or maybe I don't really like fully understand what we're trying to do with Juneteenth. I you know what? Hold on. I'm actually curious for people who are who are viewing this. Some of the viewers, can you drop in the chat or comment? How do you celebrate Juneteenth? Like, what do you do if you do anything? I would like to know that, because you know, I don't really do much. I don't know of other people who do much, and I don't know what we're supposed to be doing, if anything.
I was trying to show a book, Chris. It's called "Oh Freedom: Afro-American Emancipation Celebrations" by William H. Wiggins Jr. Right, and he gives us some history of all of these different dates and how, to some extent, it was celebrated in the past. But the problem is, and he notes this as well, is that there are various emancipation dates, so it was never really unified. Now, the question that we have today, and most people are trying to develop, is how do we unify, right, Juneteenth? How do we make this something that's a part of our annual thinking? And what I'm arguing, what I've been, trying to think about is it really something that is embraced in our culture, right? And because history, for it to have meaning, particularly dates like a Juneteenth, for it to have meaning, it has to be vital to our culture. And we're doing a good job of commercializing Juneteenth, even within the Black community, right? We're getting time off now, right? We're getting some federal holiday. We're doing a good job of commercializing it. But does it really touch the spirit of Black folk is the question. And if it isn't, what can we do about that?
Right. And I'm seeing I'm seeing people in the comments, most people are like, yeah, I don't really know what to do either. But the thing is, like, when it comes to, like, even beyond like just the celebration of it, like just celebrating Juneteenth, it's like a certain feeling that I don't get from Juneteenth, right? It's like, if I think about Thanksgiving, I get a certain feeling, right? I know that I'm, with family. I automatically think food and turkey. It's a good time. It's a good feeling. When you think of Christmas, there's a feeling, there's an emotion that comes with it. Even like most other holidays, even Valentine's Day, there's not really like a holiday like one of those, but you still, you get a certain feeling. Even beyond just celebrating it, like, why does Juneteenth not give me if it's something that's supposed to be, important to me or valuable to me, and we're starting to get days off, why don't I have a certain feeling that goes with Juneteenth like I have with everything else?
Without a culture that surrounds these days that we mark important as African American people, it's not going to have as much steam. When the moment we get into actually after Halloween, right, you begin to see parades for Thanksgiving that intertwines with Christmas. You have songs with Christmas. There are certain foods that we get with Thanksgiving. There is a whole process and conditioning that goes with each of these holidays. Now, for us, that happens, I'm sure, in different places in the United States where Juneteenth have been celebrated for decades. But in most places, Juneteenth is new to a lot of us, particularly for North Carolinians. It's very new to us. And so it can't have that same type of cultural connection than it would have like a Christmas or a Thanksgiving, something that you have been celebrating, something that you've known about your whole life. Now, the question is, how do we develop that? How do we make that important for our for our future and for our children, to the point where Juneteenth does have that kind of spiritual pull and provide some cultural insight that makes that history important, that gives the symbol of that history meaning. For instance, if those who read the book, again, I think somebody asked for the title, is called "Oh Freedom, Afro-American Emancipation Celebrations" by William H. Wiggins Jr. For some of these celebrations, people read out the Emancipation Proclamation. Have we ever even read the Emancipation Proclamation? You see what I mean? So we haven't experienced slavery. We haven't experienced that pain and suffering, but there is also not a culture that helps us to think about it with clarity, right? There's no time spent thinking about enslaved people, thinking about what progress means for African Americans, because our comparison is always white counterparts.
Right.
And that doesn't really fit who we are as a people, not only in terms of financially, but just culturally. There's something different about the way that we think about the world, the way we think about reality. And for Juneteenth to serve what we all hope it serves, we have to begin to think about how are we relating, what kind of relationships are we creating, associations are we creating that makes Juneteenth matter.
I see. I see. Because I'm looking at the comments, and I see one lady here who, she says she celebrated Juneteenth as long as she can remember. So it's normal for her, and so I'm assuming that, like, if you are able to have it socialized to you at a young age, then maybe you do get that feeling at that point. But if it's new to us, like what you're saying, like to me and my family, growing up, I actually didn't even know about Juneteenth until I was an adult. So then it's like, okay, how can I make it meaningful? I see another person was saying that they wanted to know how to do more than just eating food and celebrating. Like, is there more to it than that? But I guess, what would it take for some of us who is not introduced to? What would it take to make it something? Like, if we want to make it important, is it just a matter of like time? Like, we just have to have a whole generation where over time it becomes more of a thing? Or
so part of it, and to be honest, we're moving outside the borders of history, which is fine. I think that's important to do, because as I tell my students quite often, history doesn't solve any problems. It only teaches the depth of a problem, right? It only tells us how severe the problem is. And so those who have kind of noted that, you celebrated, I think, Juneteenth in Richmond, California, right? That should connect to our history understanding that how did these Black folks get out to Richmond, California? When did they get out there? And you mentioned this earlier, Chris, in terms of the Great Migration. The Great Migration spread the seeds of Juneteenth to these different places. And oftentimes we don't even know that, right? How these things actually connect. But to do what I mentioned earlier in terms of moving outside the borders of history is to think about what causes something to unify, right? When or what causes people to rally together. Oftentimes it is goal setting, right? When you set goals and you begin to plan, that begins to unify people, right? And that's a very proactive way to unify people. But there's an old school way that has unified Black folks for a very long time, which I'm not a proponent of in this situation, but that's pain, right? One way of just thinking about pain, when you're in pain, all your attention goes to that place that's triggered, right? That's triggering that pain. You can't think about anything else. Mm-hmm. And so, for instance, enslaved people, because they experienced the pain of slavery, that was a unifying thing for them that made something like Juneteenth have significance. Right? It just wasn't a day that just came. It was a day that they were looking forward to coming for hundreds of years. Not just them, but those before them. People who were praying that their children would experience that day. That was looking forward to that day.
Yeah.
We spend a year really looking forward to Juneteenth? Planning for a whole year? Nope. Thinking about what it means for these people to group up, to remember that past? To think back on the people who struggled to survive, to ensure that you can live today? That sacrifice? is that something that drives us? And I think that basic sense could be one of those unifying things, is to think back on that sacrifice as the moment to give meaning to this day in a different way.
So it kind of has to live with us 24/7, so that when it comes up, it's a meaningful part of what's already with us. And it's like, for the community at large, as a collective, as a whole, it's not collectively with all of us simultaneously. So then it makes it kind of okay, all right.
And it's never going to be all, but I think there's there's something to us just thinking on our history, and this is what the history, right? And we talk about the Black History timeline that's on BlackAmericanHistory.org. Like, that timeline gives us insight into kind of references in history, right? We can't go back there. We can't recapture that time. But these reference points become more important when we begin to think about meaning in our day.
Yeah.
Early E. Thorpe, one of the probably most brilliant history professors that I have read about, talked about that every generation has to rearrange the facts of history to meet the ends of their day. So we have to go back and think, what are we going to put with Juneteenth, right? What other frames of reference, events in history, activities in history that we're going to put with Juneteenth that makes Juneteenth have more significance to us?
Yeah.
That's going to help us to meet some goals that we need to meet today. So the question about Juneteenth is not about celebrating the past, just the past. I should say not just celebrating just the past, but what goals do we need to be setting today that Juneteenth becomes a tool for?
Yeah.
Use the motivation that we learned from the past to help galvanize the energy to meet those goals.
Yeah. And I feel like it'll be kind of hard. Well, not really hard, but it's there's definitely work to do, because I broke down in the last segment the current period within the Atlantic age, which is this like disorientation period where we have all these organizations that are doing great work, but we're all siloed. We all have different goals. We all have, we're all kind of in our own pockets, trying to make things happen. And it would kind of make it tough. Okay. So question.
Sure.
July 4th, 1776. You hear more and more lately. We don't need to be celebrating that because we were still enslaved for another 90 years, right? So, as if Juneteenth is our Independence Day and July 4th isn't. But most people that I know, Black and white, whether we celebrate or care about Juneteenth or not, we still celebrate July 4th regardless. Is there, like, when I'm doubling back on your the double consciousness side of your your bio, is that is that if we're really trying to honor and make Juneteenth important, does making Juneteenth important to us because of what it's for, just by way of doing that, mean that July 4th should be less important? If we're basing it off of, we were still enslaved, it's really not our freedom that we're celebrating. Because so if I care about Juneteenth, can you care about both at the same time? Like, how do you navigate that?
Right. Now we're back in history. History. And I think to do that, again, this is me though. I can't say this for everybody. What I would do again is rearrange those facts. If we're going to make Juneteenth the pinnacle, right? The transition from slavery to freedom, we also have to recognize that there are times before that where that progress towards freedom is being made. Not thinking about it just in one day. It's not just a transition from Juneteenth, 1863, 1860. Oh my goodness, I can't remember the date. 65, right? Until freedom. Now this is a march, And so part of that march is Black people fighting in the American Revolution, right? For both sides, right? For the Continental Army and for the British. Right. And it wasn't just, in terms of to set this country free from the constraints of the British monarch, but it's also about both, right? Because Blacks are fighting for both. They were fighting for both that type of freedom and their freedom. Right. And I think we can rewrite that history to make sure that we show it as a march towards it. And so that July 4th for us is an example, a symbol of steps towards our freedom that we see and that we are now saying is Juneteenth. So there's ways to think about history differently, right? Oftentimes when we see events is that happened, that's the way to think about it, that's it. And that's really not how anything works. We really have to understand that things have to be situated into culture, into meaning, and given an interpretation, right?
Yeah.
It has to be given interpret. People across the waters don't interpret July 4th the way Americans interpret July 4th. They interpret it differently. During the Civil War, there's the same battle has different names in the North and in the South. The South gave it its own name. The North gave it its own name. Why? Because you want to be able to interpret it differently. So we can interpret July 4th differently according to our history and our experience. But it doesn't have to be in this complete celebration the way we see it with white Americans. It may not even be a celebration. It could be a very somber account of that march towards freedom.
Yeah. Yeah. So it seems like we can celebrate it, but if it's gonna give us that feeling, if it's gonna like be really, really, really important to us, it has to be something more than just a date and an event. Like there has to be a certain meaning behind the date.
It's the question. So Douglas, famous question, right? What is July 4th to the slave? We can start there as a way to think about what it all means in hindsight, where we are now. For him, he's talking about it in that moment where you're celebrating July 4th, but there are people still enslaved.
Yeah.
Right? So he's going to think about it very differently than how we're going to think about it after we've seen the end of that part of slavery, that part of constraint and oppression.
Right.
Doesn't mean that the oppression is over. So how do we think about that question today? What is July 4th for us today?
Yeah.
Is now the new question. What does it mean?
So should Black people celebrate July 4th differently than white America, than the rest of the country? Like, should it mean something different, therefore be celebrated different? Like,
I think it could do both. I think to celebrate it the way others do it and then do it your own way. I don't think it has to be either or, right? Randy Dixon often talks about this concept of diunital, meaning it could be both at the same time. That for us, we are African and Western, right?
Yeah.
So we have to also understand that our ancestors fought for these things as well. And so we don't have to remove it, but there's ways that we have to think through it that fits our experience.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't think through our experiences enough. And so that's what I'm saying, like, have we really even talked about, even read the Emancipation Proclamation? How much Black history do we actually know? How much time have we spent on Black American history timeline to kind of get a sense of just the history in general?
Story, yeah.
Right. And so we don't understand some of these kind of connecting points, these points of reference that help to provide meaning and glue to not only our past, but our present.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. All right. So now I don't feel as bad about not feeling a certain way about about Juneteenth. I want it to be, I want it to be important. I want it to, to be a thing. I just don't know how to make it a thing. But
it's our generation. It means our generation has to be the one to do the work to make it a thing. Yeah. It becomes our task. That was something we pick up And that means that we have to set a goal. We got to project out. We have to have vision to say we're going to make this something because of this.
Yeah.
We need this to be that because we're trying to get here.
Right. Right.
So now that's our journey. That's our torch that we got to.
Yeah. I feel like we need to have something that symbolizes like Juneteenth, kind of like, you know, when you think of Thanksgiving, you automatically think turkey. When you think of Christmas, you automatically think Christmas tree, presents, and Santa Claus. When you think of Valentine's Day, you think about chocolate candy and roses and and hearts.
Post slavery, and one of the textbooks that we use for our Black Experience course, one of the things that the enslaved people, in the small time that they had a level of freedom that was pretty darn good, which was eroded very quickly, they said to themselves that they were not going to plant any cotton. So how about on Juneteenth, we don't wear any cotton, no cotton shirts.
No cotton shirts on Juneteenth.
No cotton shirts on Juneteenth. But you know what that does, and I'm trying to show you how culture works, right? What that does then means that there's a business that can come out of this that supplies shirts and clothing that does not utilize cotton, that can be Black owned, that Black people are going to purchase, right, for that day. That can sustain them because of so many of us in the United States for a whole year.
Yeah.
Right. Another thing that they said that they were going to plant, it was going to be no cotton, but in lieu of that, they said one of the things that they were going to plant was sweet potatoes. So that can be something that we use, right? All of these kind of small things. But again, you can't just use that. Like the history again is not going to answer the question. We still have to think, why are we doing this? Is sweet potatoes good for health? Because we know that in today's time, the crisis of Black health is at astronomical levels.
Right.
And how important are sweet potatoes to a healthy diet?
Right.
And how does Juneteenth now help to solve and help us think about problems that we're facing today? Right.
That is, yeah.
Now we are creating that kind of symbiotic relationship between the past and the present.
That is interesting. Yeah. Okay. I see where you're going with it. So we got a question, Artist Hustle. He asked, what are some practical steps a regular person can do to help make Juneteenth more meaningful throughout the year? Like what could we do throughout the year that would help make it more meaningful over time?
I think we have some ideas here. Denise said whatever we're doing should be incorporated into the Black History Month. I guess that's serving as a kind of a forerunner for something.
Yeah.
As a regular person, Juneteenth, to be honest, I just think we're at a stage that we probably need a working paper, think tanks.
Yeah.
And we can just start kind of developing something together. I really can't answer that question for you. I
Man, I'm telling you, I really feel like we need our thing that we automatically think about that has some kind of meaning behind it. Just like the turkey and Thanksgiving, just like the Christmas tree Christmas, just like the Easter egg hunt for Easter.
I mean, you got to think about the person. You got to think about how people experience. You got to think about an experience. When you think of experience, what happens? So this is why I said you got to, when you're getting down into it, when you're doing good history, you're not just focusing on one thing, like the event. You begin to think about how people are living in history. It's not just the turkey. You see the turkey, right? You don't just see the turkey. You smell the turkey. There's a smell that comes with Thanksgiving. There are sounds and noises that comes with Christmas.
Yeah.
That gets into what they call the Christmas spirit. You have to get into a spirit.
Yeah.
And I know we're trying to move away from this religious idea, but this is what we mean by religion, right? That this thing has some routine to it that is connecting to all of us, right?
Right.
It's an experience that connects to our inner and outer selves. And I think that's what we're talking about. So when you put on the cotton made out of hemp, right? It might be a little bit more scratchy.
Yeah.
But guess what? When you look at some of the clothing that enslaved people wore, when they wasn't wearing cotton, they were actually wearing hemp. And guess those shirts were what? Quite scratchy. Right? Quite scratchy. So you begin to connect to the past in that way, sometimes unknowingly. And oftentimes, to be honest, That's the way it works. It's really a few people who will set it in motion, who plant the seed, and others unknowingly begin to water.
Yeah.
Unknowingly, just by participating. So I would say is participate, whatever it is that's out there. I guess that answers the other question. Participate, join in, right? But I do think we have to kind of set some future goals that we can use Juneteenth as a catalyst.
Yeah. I like that, Kathy. Spiritual connection to our ancestors, like that kind of meaning. Like it has to be the core, and then that way, our celebrations can really like take root in a different form that brings us that feeling, that has that immediate thought. Like right now, we can just kind of do whatever, what's out there, what we're familiar with, right? Like you might join, something like this. There may be a festival or, some kind of event. But if we can, like you said, like someone in this generation say, hey, let's really put some real meaning behind what this should mean to our goals, and have something that symbolizes Juneteenth in an emotional way, in a way that, like Kathy said, connects us, to our ancestors or to our past, or in some way that connects us to the goals that we want to solve. Then it'll really start to give us that feeling, just like these other holidays that we celebrate.
And history gives us endless content to do that, to kind of play with meaning, right? We know that enslaved people woke up, can't see in the morning, and they work to can't see it at night.
Yeah.
That right? How do we use that?
Yep.
Waking up at a certain time together, spending between say 12 and 2 just out in the sun, to be reminded of what? The heat that they worked in.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then when the sun goes down, there's something that goes with that. Like all these, we can do this. This is endless. There's endless content, endless data that we can use to connect ourselves to the history. But if it's not connected to our present, if it's not connected to what it is that we are right now and what it is that we're trying to become, that's meaningless.
Yeah.
It ain't gonna hold. It ain't gonna hold any water.
Yeah. Yep. Wow. Okay. This is great, man. And let me answer. I'm going to answer Shantina's question before I forget. If you look right there, blackamericanhistory.org. That is where the timeline is. You go to the website. It's completely free. It's searchable. All you have to do is go to the site. There's a big search bar and just search. Right now, it has a simple search functionality. So if you search any topic, it'll pull out the history of whatever topic you're looking for. It's a really cool site. But yeah, this is good, man. I think we could go ahead and wrap it up, man. I appreciate you kind of giving us that psychological, that more intellectual thinking around Juneteenth, around what it means to us, where we take it from here, like how to make it, very, very meaningful to all of us. I think this is really great, and thank you for all the people who were commenting and who had questions. I really, really appreciate it. I guess last question for you. I just want to give you a second. Any kind of plug that you have? Are you writing something? Do you have a book coming out? Do you got anything you want to tell anybody?
Well, nothing. I'm researching in the moment. Okay. Again, I would say this, Chris. I spend a lot of time thinking about our people, thinking about particularly the enslaved people. One thing that I've been reading, and a person I've been reading, which we may not know much about, is this guy named Howard Thurman, and he talks a lot about suffering and a lot about pain, but not in this kind of traumatic way, and is trying to trauma-centered way of thinking about it. He talks about how pain can be. He says that pain is both positive and creative, right? Positive and creative. And so when I read things like that, it makes me think about how enslaved people were in pain, but they use it in creative ways. So you start thinking about the spiritual, you start thinking about the folklore, these folk tales, they're coming together. You begin to see the strength of these people. A long time ago, a lot of historians would say that those were obviously the strongest generations that we've ever produced. And I think, again, when we talk about Juneteenth, we need to pay homage to that. Seriously, we need to pay homage to the fact that these people survived that ordeal, that we're here today.
Yeah.
And I think if any plug, I would say that.
Nice. All right. Well, thank you, man. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you all for the for the engagement. We have one small little piece left coming up after this to help close out the close out the program today. And yeah, we'll see you on the other side. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the show. I hope you learned something today or got some kind of meaning or fulfillment out of it. If you didn't and you think you want some more, we implore you to check out our website at blackamericanhistory.org. Look through that timeline. It's the world's largest database showing all of Black history in a chronological order. Like I said, if there's any feedback that you have, we love the comments. We love the engagement. We're definitely going to go cipher through some more of that. So if you feel like we didn't address your question, we're definitely going to go check it out afterwards. If you're watching the replay later and you feel like you want to add a comment, we'll be checking back as well through days, weeks, months, whatever it takes to kind of answer those questions and address your needs or concerns there. If you feel like, hey, man, I learned a lot of new stuff today, and how did I go on without knowing any of this? We saw some of the comments where some of you were like, I've never heard any of this, and I'm majoring in this kind of information. Like I said, check out our newsletter at blackamericanhistory.org/newsletter. You can see the QR code right below me here. This is going to give you that type of information that you learned today. We kind of give you that quick, like, digestible way to kind of take that in. 10 minutes a month. It's the easiest thing you can do. And like I said, it's so beneficial. Comes right to your phone. You can sit down at your computer with it, look at it on your iPad, share it with your family, your friends, challenge your mind, stimulate you. It's amazing. Also, we are a nonprofit 501c3 company. We're two guys trying to put this thing together. So as you can see below me as well, if you have anything to donate, it would definitely help. If you can't donate, we just enjoy your support as well, right? So anything that can kind of help get the message out there, share the information. We know a lot of this information is being withheld and secluded in a lot of different places. So like I said, anything to help us get that out there, we definitely appreciate that. We appreciate you joining us today. Oh, before I forget, Chris, did you want to add some more information?
Well, I was just going to say, like, definitely if you can donate, it helps us a lot because it takes a lot of time and a lot of resources to put even something like this together. And we're constantly trying to put on events and do things that can help get the message out. Also, definitely subscribe to the newsletter. It is very, very enlightening. We try to make that fun, just like we tried to make this. We hope you all learned a lot today. And thank you. Thank you for being with us.
Awesome. And like I said, we want to continue to do this. So like I said, please let us know. You can reach out in the comments. You can email us directly at hello@blackamericanhistory.org as well. Let us know what you think. Is this something that you want? You want more of it? Is there more topics that you would like us to go over, or bring in different professionals or guest speakers to speak on these topics? Like I said, reach out, let us know. We love the feedback, and we'll definitely go through it as well. Before I forget, I do want to announce our winner from our newsletter contest. And once again, you can join this contest by signing up at our newsletter at blackamericanhistory.org/newsletter. Today's winner is Diane Williams. So congratulations, Diane. You have won 2 tickets to Bad Boys Ride or Die, which is in theaters now. So we'll be reaching out to you after this broadcast to get you set up with that. And like I said, I hope you have a good time there. With that being said, we enjoyed this time with you. I hope you guys have a wonderful Juneteenth. And like I said, take what you've learned today, and like I said, share with others. It's great information, and I hope you guys really enjoyed that. So with that being said, we want to leave you guys with one last thing to chew on. Take care.
How has the writing of history by European writers, historians, helped to promote what some have called the Europeanization of human consciousness?
Well, if the total source of your information is from a group of scholars that comes from one culture, they're imprisoned in their own culture, and most of them even don't have the capacity to stand outside the culture and to view it critically in the first place. And some don't even have the intent to do that. So there's nothing that they can present other than a focus that comes from their own center, which we call European-centered. And if I, as a person who studies, do so uncritically, or if I don't participate in the production of scholarship, raising the kinds of questions and priorities that I need to know about as an African person, a person of African descent, from an African-centered perspective, then there's nothing left for me but a European-centered information base, which will produce in my head a European way of viewing the world, even though I'm a person of African descent.
Let's break it down. How does European consciousness manifest itself in our lives? A couple of examples.
It manifests itself in self-hatred, where African people actually accept the doctrine of white supremacy and believe that white people are superior to black people, so much so that they reject their own historical memories, they reject identification with their brothers and sisters, they reject identification with Africa, they reject identification with African culture. You know, this is literally cultural suicide. And the reason is that it's so painful sometimes to be associated with the kinds of images that are projected about African people, the false images.
When I wrote this question down, I had no idea your answer would be that great.
Yeah.